Hello students, I hope you are fit and fine. Today we are going to revise our third chapter of geography, that is our changing earth. In this, first we are going to discuss the back exercise, then we will discuss the extra questions. Now the first question is, answer the following questions briefly. First one is, why do the plates move? Answer, plates move due to the movement in the molten magma found in the interior of the earth. So, we know that the outer surface of the earth is divided into various plates, and those plates they move because there is molten magma under the upper surface, and because there is a movement in the magma. So, because of that plates on the magma also moves. Next question, what are exogenic and endogenic forces? We have two kinds of forces which changes the face of the earth, which acts on the surface of the earth. The first force is exogenic force. Exogenic forces are those forces which act on the surface of the earth and cause changes on the surface. Means these are the forces which are on the surface, which are working from outside of the earth, and they are changing the surface of the earth, like erosion, deposition, weathering and gradation. These are the various forces which are working on the surface of the earth. Next force is endogenic force. Endogenic forces are those forces which originate in the interior of the earth and cause changes on the surface of the earth. So, endogenic means inside. So, you can remember this word endogenic from inside. Inside the earth these forces are working, and because of this inside force the surface of the earth change. Like you can take the example of volcanoes, because volcanoes there is a movement in the magma, and the volcano in the volcanoes the magma comes out from the weaker part of the earth on the surface, and where earlier was plain area, now because of the deposition of magma, that lava makes a huge rock or small mountain there. So, volcanoes or the earthquakes, they are the interior forces from inside the earth which are changing the surface of the earth. Next question is, what is erosion? Erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents. Now, wearing away means to take away. Fine, wearing away, to move or to take away. So, erosion is a process of taking away of the landscape by different agents. Now, what are the agents? Like the running water, glacier, wind, groundwater and sea waves. So, these are the agents. These all the agents, they are working on the surface of the earth, and they are eroding the landscape. They are moving, or they are dissolving with them, or they are taking away with them the landscape, and this is how they are changing the landform. Next question, how are floodplains formed? Now, in this question we have to tell the formation of floodplains. As the name tells, floodplains. So, the plains which are made after floods, those plains are known as floodplains. So, how they are formed? During rains, rivers overflow their banks. Whenever there is heavy rainfall, the river water, it comes out from the banks. This leads to the flooding of the nearby area. The water which comes out from the river after overflowing from the banks, that is that flooded the nearby area of the river. After the flood has receded, a layer of a fine material and other material is deposited over the plain in the form of sediment, and slowly it means that when the water recedes, either seeps into the soil or evaporates because of the heat of the sun, and the remain which is left on the surface, the uppermost layer is formed of sediments. Whatever was there in the flood water, that all material is deposited on the surface. This leads to the formation of the floodplain, and this is how the floodplains are formed. Next question, what are sand dunes? Sand dunes are heaps of sand deposited at a place by wind's action in the desert. So, this means the sand dunes are huge deposit of sand. They are like small hills of sands which are placed at different places by the wind. Wherever the wind blows, it takes that sand along with it, and where the wind is slow or wind cannot carry that sand, it deposited that sand over there. So, this is the deposition work of wind. So, wind deposit the sand from one place to another place and makes a heap of the sand. This is known as sand dunes. Next question, how are the beaches formed? Now, beaches are formed because of the sea waves. Sea waves strike the coast. They erode the coast and carry the eroded material in the form of silt and other material. Whenever the sea waves strike the coast, after striking the coast, they erode the material from the coast in the form of silt and other material, and when they withdraw, they deposit the silt and other material along the shore. This forms the beaches. When the sea waves, they withdraw from the coast, they deposit that material which they took along from that eroded material which they have collected, the silt and the other material which they had collected after the erosion, then they deposit it on the shores. This is how the beaches are formed. Next question, what are the Oxbow lakes? Oxbow lakes, when the meanders loop is cut off from the main river, it forms a cut off lake. It shapes like an oxbow. Hence, the cut off lake is called Oxbow Lake. Now, when a river is passing and there is a meander, huge meander, in the meander is that curve, huge curve in the course of the river, and when it is cut off, in this picture you can see it is cut off, this meander which was earlier here, the river was flowing, this was the course of the river, but now the river started moving directly straight, and this area which was a curve earlier, it is separated from the main river, and this is how this separated part from the river forms like a oxbow. That is why this lake which is separated from the main river is known as Oxbow Lake. Now, second question is about the reasons. You have to give the reasons. The first one is some rocks have the shape of mushrooms. Mushrooms, I like mushrooms. Do you like mushrooms? They are very yummy. So, let us see how the rocks have a shape of mushroom. Some rocks, they have the shape of mushroom because when rocks fall in the course of a running dust storm, the suspended particles of sand strike the lower portion of the rock and erode them. So, what happens whenever there is a rock in the course of, it means whenever there is a running dust storm, and if a rock comes in between that course So the dust particles of the storm, they strike with the lower part of that rock which comes in between and they erode it. The upper portion of the rock remains uneroded, but the lower part is eroded by the dust storms because it comes in between the way or course of the running storm. So, in course of time, it means after some time, after some years, the rocks take up the shape of a mushroom. In this picture you can see this is a mushroom rock. So, how it is formed? This lower part of this rock, it came in the course of the dust storm. So, the particles of the dust storm, they eroded the lower part of the rock, but because this upper part was not eroded, so the shape which is made by the erosion of the lower part seems to be a mushroom. So, this kind of rocks are known as mushroom rocks. They are found in the desert areas. Next, floodplains are very fertile. Now, we have to give the reasons why floodplains are very fertile. The first point is they are made up of silt and other material which are brought by the flood. So, as earlier in the question we have come to know that floodplains are made because of the water which comes out of the river and which comes out of the bank and collected around the river, and slowly the water seeps or seep into the earth or evaporates and the silt remains, made the floodplains. So, that silt which was in the flood water, that rivers brought them in from the mountains. So, the soil of the mountain is very rich in humus and it is silt, that soil is silt and full of humus. So, that is why due to spread of the new silt, every year during the floods, that soil is renewed with the silt and humus from the mountains. So, due to the spread of new silt, the floodplains are fertile areas. Next question is, sea caves are turned into stakes. Now, we have to give the reason for this. What is the reason? That the sea waves strike the coast and erode the soft rocks. Hard rocks remain uneroded. This action results in the formation of sea caves. Now, first of all, we must know how the sea caves are formed. Sea caves are formed when the sea waves, they erode the rocks, softer part of the rocks, that is dissolved, eroded by the sea waves, because continuously the waves are striking with the rock and the soft part of the rock is dissolved, eroded by the waves, and the hard part of the rock which was not able to be eroded, that remains standing, and this is how the sea caves are formed. In course of time, it means after few years, the roof of the cave also comes down due to erosion. Now, sea waves are further eroding that hard rock also, but because the soft part is already eroded and because of the gravitational pull and the pressure from the upper hard rock, the upper part, the roof of the cave comes down and the arm or the walls of the cave remain standing like pillars. These pillars are termed as stakes. Next reason which we have to tell, buildings collapse due to earthquakes. Now, this is very important. Why buildings collapse whenever there is a huge earthquake? When the earthquake is very severe, the buildings collapse. So, what is the reason behind that? First of all, most buildings are not built or made according to the earthquake proof, means they are not earthquake proof. They are not made according to the shock of the earthquake, so that they could absorb the shock of earthquake. Whenever earthquake strikes, the buildings are not capable of resisting, so the vibration of the earthquake, they tear apart due to shallow foundation, but standard interior material and lack of adequate steel. So, because of that, those buildings collapse and fall down like a pack of paper or the cards. Now, we will discuss the extra question. Question number 1. How do the lithospheric plates move? They move around very slowly, just a few millimeter each year. You remember I told you that Indian plate is moving towards the Eurasian plate a few millimeter each year. Next question, define focus and epicenter. The place in the crust where the movement starts is called the focus, and the place on the surface above the focus is called the epicenter. Next question, name the 3 types of earthquake waves. We have 3 types of earthquake waves: P waves, S waves and L waves. P waves are the longitudinal waves. These waves travel in a longitudinal plane. S waves are the transverse waves. These waves travel in a transverse position. L waves are the surface waves. These waves travel on the surface of the earth. Question number 4. What is seismograph? A seismograph is a machine which measures an earthquake. Now, measuring an earthquake means what is the intensity of the earthquake. You must have heard that there was an earthquake in New Delhi, Richter scale 4.5, or there was an earthquake in Afghanistan with the Richter scale of 6.4. So what is this 4.5 and 6.4? These are the readings which are given by the seismograph. Seismograph measures the intensity of the earth as the waves moves, P, S and L waves, as they move in the surface or in the surface of the earth or in the water bodies. This seismograph measures the waves, how they are moving. So, faster the readings, more severe is the earthquake. So, seismograph is used to measure an earthquake. Question number 5. Name the scale on which the magnitude of the earthquake is measured. That is the Richter scale. You know the distance between your house and your school that you measure in kilometers, isn't it? The distance between your house and your school is a few kilometers, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 13. But when we measure earthquake, we measure it in Richter scale. Fine? The Richter scale is the magnitude through which we measure the earthquake. Now, the last question is that you have to draw a neat and label diagram of origin of earthquake. Here I try to draw an diagram. So, in this diagram, this green part which you are looking at, this is the upper surface on which this railing or this road is there, the upper surface on which we used to stand. This is the section of that area. Fine. This is a road, a yellow color is the road, this is fencing, and this is the section, you may say the block which I cut it from of that section. So, these are 2 plates. You can see this line in this straight line. This is the fault, which means one plate is on its left and another is on the right. There are 2 different plates, and fault is the difference between those 2 plates. Now, these 2 plates move in different directions. These arrows shows the direction of the movement. So, because these 2 plates move, here somewhere in the surface the earthquake occurs. So, this point where the earthquake starts, that is known as focus. This star through star I try to show you. This is the place from where the earthquake started. That point is known as focus, and exactly on the surface of the same star from where the earthquake started, exactly on the surface is known as epicenter. Now you got it? This red star is somewhere within the surface of the earth, down the layers of the surface, because those plates moved, and here the red star is showing from where the earthquake started. So, this red star is the focus, and exactly on the surface of the same place, on the surface, that is known as the epicenter. That purple star is exactly over that red star. This is on the surface, that is known as the epicenters. And these rings which I have made over here, these are various seismic waves, P, L or S waves, which are traveling in all the directions.